Okay, you mentioned that a couple of familiar Japanese names, Kazu Inaba and Hiro Arita. There are two great Japanese musicians who deeply admire you and consider you their mentor. Back in the day,
Wow.
young Japanese bluegrass players were incredibly eager to learn. Kazu and Hiro stayed at your place to study under you. What was that experience like for you?
It was absolutely wonderful. I've got this wonderful little handprint. Hiro had stayed with my father. My father was in the final stages of the cancer that took him away. But Hiro wound up spending a few months up there, actually with my brother-in-law, Al Osteen. He stayed for a while with him in Greenville, South Carolina. And then he came up and stayed with my dad. And I've got this wonderful thing, this little handprint that he put on the wall and
Mm.
wrote an inscription for it. Um, Hiro was, I mean, both of those guys were just, they were inspirations to me. They were inspirations to me to think outside the box, you know. Actually, I met Kaz's brother before I met him. I met Masatoshi before I met Kaz.
Mm.
But they, they're just inspirational as all get out to me. It's just like Kaz's father. Kaz's father looked almost like this guy in the picture back here. He played the clawhammer banjo. Wonderful little guy. His actual profession was he carved ornaments for weddings and funerals and all kinds of other stuff. I've got a little lion's head he carved for me one time. But those guys were just all inspirational to me from the standpoint that they could engage themselves in something that was completely alien to from where they came
Mm.
and become so proficient and accomplished at it. And because I mean, Hiro
Yeah.
is just he when Kaz called me up and asked me to make the first trip to Japan, I called Hiro and I said, what's this guy like? And Hiro told me, he said he knows more about bluegrass than you do. And I, oh yeah, I got over there and he did. He had these massive songbooks full of every song, acoustic string band song that had ever been done, and he could sing them all and play them all. We used to stay up all night. We'd get through playing at 10 or 11 o'clock, go find a bar somewhere that would close the doors and let us stay in it. We'd sit in there all night, 6 or 7 o'clock the next morning and play, and he'd just be going through one song after another. That was the reality. He did know a lot more about it than I did.
Mm.
And then I found out later about his knowledge of Stephen Foster and some of the other, music, traditional music that's from the United States here. But both of those guys were just, they were inspirational to me.
It's great. So you learned a lot from them too.
Yes, I did.
Right. In 1971, you joined Charlie Moore's band
Yes,
and
sir.
recorded an album together.
Yeah,
Given
we
that, yeah,
recorded like three or four.
this was your first professional gig after playing with Bill Monroe in 1967. What impact did Charlie have on you both musically and personally?
Well, musically, it was a job, to play, and it enabled me. I was playing with somebody that was basically a vocalist there,
Mhm.
and it helped me in being able to, play melodically um, songs. And there were a lot of things about Charlie. Charlie had a lot of issues, and one of them especially was his issues with alcohol. And
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I took away from that personally is trying to keep myself in a little better working order than Charlie did himself through the latter stages of his life. The recordings you're talking about, I did with him. I did the first one that had the Rebel Soldier with him that we did for Wango. Then I did a couple of others for, I don't know whether it's Old Homestead or something like that. We recorded them with Paul Mullins in Cincinnati. One was a gospel record, and the other one was just a straight ahead with a lot of Charlie's original songs on it and everything.
Mhm.
And he was an exceptional entertainer. I mean, his whole thing of being a DJ and everything, he could talk so well. He could entertain an audience with talking to them, singing to them. And that was one of the things that impressed me a lot about him too, was just his talent as a vocalist and a master of ceremonies.
It sounds like Charlie had a major impact on you. But interestingly, while he was a significant figure in bluegrass history, it seems like he hasn't received the recognition he truly deserves. What are your thoughts on that?
All I can do is agree with you. I mean, he was an exceptional guy. He had psychological issues, that caused things, but he was just a heck of a talented guy. The whole circuit that he was doing, he and Bill Napier had worked for the Stanleys. And when Charlie Moore and Bill Napier got together, they wound up with a King recording contract, and they wound up with a jukebox hit called The Truck Driver's Queen. But it was only a limited audience that they were able to play to after that. The bluegrass festivals hadn't come along at that point, and he just didn't get the exposure that a lot of the guys did after 1965. This was earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier in the 60s, that he and Bill Napier had their stuff happen. But Charlie never did wind up working the circuit like Carter and Ralph started out. Carter and Ralph did the first Fincastle Festival and all that, and then Ralph passed away, and Carter continued on. But Charlie never did get out into that bluegrass festival circuit until way later on. He had practically quit playing music and was just doing DJ work at in Piedmont, South Carolina, down there. That's what he was doing when I went to work for him.
Okay. In 1973, you played bass for Newgrass Revival for a while. How
Yes.
did that come about?
Well, when we did the Hank Wilson's back record, and I wound up going to Tulsa with a fellow named Les Blank, who was Leon's photographer. And Leon said something about me putting a band together and going out on the road to front his next tour, and that way he'd be able to do some of the things off the Hank Wilson's back, to get out of that rock and roll mode that he was in back then. Heck, the first audience we ever played for, we walked out on stage, there were 65,000 people in front of us in Tampa Stadium. But anyhow, Sam and them, Ebo had some issues that ultimately wound him up in him getting in a lot of trouble. But Sam asked me if I would come and help him out while we were doing the tour. And I just said I didn't, bring you all along this tour just to break the band up. And I actually left a couple of weeks before the tour was over. I had another job. I was just freelancing back in those days. And so I was doing that job with the Harry James Orchestra out there. And Sam called me up and said they were getting ready to get ready to get rid of him. Would I come work for them for a while just to help them out until they could find a bass player? Well, I told him I would do it. And the first job I did was at Reidsville, North Carolina, because I thought this was going to be a 30, 60, 90-day job, something like that, just a temporary deal. Well, I played that first Reidsville. We went somewhere up in Michigan or Minnesota, somewhere up at the play some blues festival that the Paul Butterfield Blues Band was on. And then we went back to Winfield, Kansas the next weekend and came back, and I wound up working for him and kept on and kept on and kept on. And occasionally I'd say to Sam, have you found a bass player yet? And, it didn't happen. So the next year at Reidsville, I had been there a year at that point. That was when I started the Pat Mahoney International Fan Club down there. And then I made it for about 3 months after that. We were doing a month-long tour of the West Coast, fronting Doc and Merle Watson and the Frosty Morn Band back then. And I just told Sam when that 30 days was over, I said, it's been over a year now, about a year and 3 or 4 months. You're going to have to find you a bass player when you get back to Nashville. I said, I don't feel like doing this anymore. And I wound up quitting the band there, or giving my notice. And when they got back, I think, and it wasn't long after that they wound up hiring John Cowan, which he was a wonderful bass player. And my goodness, what a singer.
Yeah.
So they needed him a lot more than they needed me. That was for
Thank you. As I mentioned at the beginning, this album, 40 years late, was one that made you my hero. I
well.
like all
Thank you.
the tunes. I like all the tunes included in that album, particularly the title track 40 Years Late. What was your
Yeah,
concept behind this album?
the concept behind it.
Yes.
I basically put together 3 bands to do that record with, and one of the groups was that I played some of the old stuff like Gray Eagle and just the straight up stuff. Jimmy Brock was the bass player on the whole thing.
Mhm.
But one of the bands I had Marty Stewart and Roland White come in, and I think we did the Scruggs medley and some of that with them. Another of the bands that I had come in was the Swing Band, and that's where I had Buck White. Um, Carl Himmel played the drums on some of that stuff. Um, who else? Buck White, Ronnie Reno might have been the rhythm
Mhm.
guitar player on those sessions. And then the last group that I had together that I did the 40 Years Late with, that was Norman Blake, Sam Bush, and Kenny Baker were the accompanists on that. So that's the
Mhm.
3 I made. My statement on 3 pieces of music there: the swing music that I played, and I had played, and I had played some for Buck White. I don't think I was producing him at that point. I may have been. I think I did one record for him for some company out of Texas that might have been there. I know Jack Hicks was on parts of the record. Ricky Skaggs and Jerry Douglas were on it. That was a White's album that I had done down at Pete Drake Studios in Nashville. But anyhow, I just had 3 different groups there, and one of them was playing the straight ahead old Dusty Miller stuff like that, and
Mhm.
the Scruggs medley. And then the other one was the swing band, and then the other one was the one that played the more avant-garde
Mhm.
music that I was working on then.
Great. Can you play one of these tunes from that album? Can you play now?
Which one do you want me to play?
What about 40 Years Late?
Now, should I play this with picks on or without them bare-fingered like I am?
Whatever you like.
Let me show you. The picks are going to be really loud.
That's fine. Fine with me.
Well, let me see if I can do it first.
Okay.
My hands aren't moving very good this time of day.
All right, once more time then. What direction do you see bluegrass music taking in the future? And are there any younger musicians today that stand out to you?
Well, I'll start off with the younger musicians.
Okay.
And I'll say, you got guys out there like Corey Walker, Trevor Holder, Lincoln Hensley, uh,
Mm.
it's the Trey Wellington. You've got those Josiah brothers, the ones who works. I think the guy's name is Josiah Schroed, who works for Michael Cleveland, and Josiah Tyree, who works for Cody Norris in the Cody Norris band. Those are all young guys that I've heard. But the bottom line, is I don't really listen to anyone anymore. So it's hard for me. Is like I said, I've heard that Corey Walker guy play some with David Greer, who I think is one of the most phenomenal musicians I ever encountered out there. The guy Trevor Holder I was talking about, he can play anything from Fred Van Epps all the way through his piano playing and everything else he does. He's just a marvelous, marvelous musician. So what about the future of bluegrass? I think the young fella that's come along now, or the young man, Billy Strings, has the opportunity to do for string band music what nobody since Bill Monroe has been able to do, and that's increase its presence around the world. The only thing that I think he's lacking at this point is his Blue Moon of Kentucky. You know, the last time I looked a few years ago, Blue Moon of Kentucky was the 16th most recorded song of all time. And I think when Billy Strings puts out a song like that, that will put him in the same realm that Bill Monroe was as a creative artist going along. And that has to do with the future that you had asked me about. Now,
Butch, this is going to be the last question, okay?
all right.
We can't finish this interview without asking you about Snuffy, right? Now, when you were with Snuffy in 1972, he was 64. You are now older than Snuffy back then. Do
Yes,
you
sir.
think,
I'll be 76 soon.
all right, do you think you have become like him as you wished 48 years ago?
No, I never did, desire to become like him. It's like that's the reason I entitled the tune 40 Years Late. If you read the liner notes on that, it said, one of the things I wish more than anything in the world is I could drop back 40 years and sit out on the front porch and pick with Snuffy. I never really wanted to play like him. That wasn't a goal. It was him as a person. He was one of the most kindest, funniest. When I met him, I found out where Don Reno got all his entertaining, or got a lot of his entertainment qualities from, and they came right straight from Snuffy Jenkins. And if you want to listen to where the three-fingered roll come from, listen to Byron Parker and the Hired Hands going to lay down my old guitar. And Snuffy plays that out of a C position. He always tuned his banjo to A for the fiddle players to accommodate them to be able to play in A and D and E all right. But anyhow, Byron Parker and them, if you listen to Going to Lay Down in This Old Guitar and listen to Snuffy play it, and then listen to Earl play Careless Love with Bill Monroe on the Grand Ole Opry, one of their performances on the Grand Ole Opry, you'll hear that the roll is exactly the same. That's where the three-fingered roll come from. Smith Hammett got it from Fred Van Epps, and he passed it on to Snuffy and Rex Brooks, who were, Snuffy was just a teenager when he was, or early on in his career, when he was working as with those guys. And it was Smith Hammett wound up getting killed when he was in his early 40s. But Snuffy had played as a comedian and guitar playing clawhammer banjo player in that band. But from Smith Hammett and Rex Brooks, he picked up that three-finger style that this Smith Hammett had observed Fred Van Epps play. So I don't know what I can say about Snuffy. He was just, he was Snuffy Jenkins. He was a unique character, one of the nicest gentlemen I was ever around. And I learned to play his wife's favorite banjo tune in Red Wing.
Okay, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it sounds like we are running out of time. Butch, thank you so much for sharing your incredible stories with us today.
Yes, Butch, I've learned a great deal, and I'm very happy to have met you online.
Well, if there's anything else you guys need, just send it back to me. I'll be more than happy to do this again for you. If you need me to patch up things, or if you think we can figure out how to make the banjo sound come through it, I'll be more than happy to do this anytime you want to finish up or clarify anything that I've said.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank
And
you
to
for
all
having
of you watching, thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this interview as much as we did.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to see more interviews like this.
That's right, and stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be talking to Chakku Nation. Until then, take care and keep the music alive.
Okay, see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye, Butch.